So another question someone wrote in, how can you do some trainings to help cliques at work? Because in this course, it's not all about designing workshops that anybody can come to. It can also be designing workshops for intact work groups. But I want to start by saying that will take much more advanced facilitation, moderate to advanced, because there's all kinds of, well, in a public workshop, in an organization, in a community, there's all kinds of political dynamics, unspokens, hidden agendas, relationships. Literally, I was just doing a training. Some people have been there over 30 years, and most people had been there 20 or more. So all kinds of dynamics that I had not been prepped in, that's just below the surface, and it was an intact team. And so needs assessment, you want to ask more about that. And the truth is, we'll never know all of it, whether it's a public or one for an intact group. So if you're working with cliques at work, now I guess you could do this in your organization as a HR offering or as part of the training and development. In general, what could you do? So you could listen to both levels, a generic one as well as one that's just for a group. I want to suggest there's ways to do it indirectly and directly, depending upon their willingness, and it might even be a two-parter, three-parter, sometimes four conversations are needed when there's real conflict and cliques. But I might start out warming people up, kind of a what's up, and I'd move them around. I let people maybe find the first person, and then after that, you might want to do concentric circles, so there's forced pairings. So what's your purpose, your passion? And what are you excited about what the purpose of our work group is, or the purpose of our organization? So they get in their higher selves. That's the purpose of those. You can have them do an activity about what's their vision of a high-performing team, an inclusive team. And a couple quick questions could be, again, another dyad. Think about a team anywhere, even if it's this one, don't name it. That's the most effective team, high performing, you felt included, valued, other people did. Yes, there were bumps, but you pretty much worked through them. So have people get as close to that as possible, and then tell some stories and really pull those out. You might even want to chart them. And then a time you were on a team, maybe outside of here, but again, no names, where you didn't feel belonging, respect, or there were dynamics that were unaddressed. And or what are just kind of generically some of the dynamics of teams that are ineffective. And by then you may have told a story to name about a time you were in a group that had a clique. Because if that's the centerpiece, you may want to only do cliques, but I would broaden it usually, because there's probably other dynamics that results or influenced why people formed small groups that people then call cliques. And some of it might be in privileged identity, some of it might be out of marginalized for survival and thriving. And so this is some of the indirect warming up. It's all about team building. Now, I like to do team building around equity inclusion, so you could use the group identity cards to have people reflect on early messages or socialization, just indirect ways to get people to know each other better. You could use the nonviolent communication needs work that you saw in the navigating triggers work. It's one of the intrapersonal roots, and there's a whole list of needs. You could make cards out of those and have people talk about, in a work environment, what are, your 8 to 10 values or needs. And again, it's tactile, like the group identity card. So people might say mutuality, effectiveness, competence, harmony. There's, 100 or so. So it is a lot of work to make them, but you can just have them use the sheet and reflect which ones of these are important to you. And if you had to choose 8 or 10 that you think help you, I asked this question last week. What helps you thrive in your work environments? What kind of a work environment supports you to do your best work? So that's another variation if they're cliques. Again, this is all the foundation building, warm up, and what's the vision we're working towards. Other ways you could do team building that is indirect. The Myers-Briggs can be a great way. Some type of conflict style can also be good, since cliques are probably having all kinds of conflict and people are feeling left out. So I use the Strength Deployment Inventory, SDI. Some people use Thomas Kilmann. I have some colleagues that use the shark, teddy bear, owl, fox. There's another one or something. So There's all kinds of things you can probably find free online, or maybe somebody in the organization can come in and do a 2-hour workshop. Again, we're helping people get to know each other, maybe build relationships across clique and realize, they're pretty nice people. Cross identities as well. So those are all some ways to do team building. I mean, you can do the generic team buildings of everybody's in a lifeboat, who would you throw out? But I haven't done those for 35 years. I don't find those as value add as using Myers-Briggs, strength deployment, conflict styles, EDI, topics, strengths, another thing people do. So I have that much more team building that has a real core purpose to group effectiveness. And then there are ways to do more indirect. Well, actually, one more indirect, learning guidelines. Having the group talk about high-performing team, what would be the guidelines that you would want for this team. You could use the unproductive dynamic handout to have them talk about what are some of the behaviors that you've done or that you think can undermine group effectiveness. You may want to revise that if you're doing just cliques to add a few more that are clique-ish. I think if you look at that, there's some there, but you may want to have some more direct ones. And so which ones of these, if they happen, what could be the negative impact? When have you maybe done some unintendedly? You weren't thinking about the impact, but what was probably your impact? Any of that helps build authentic dialogue, engagement, and again, the foundation to then do more direct conversations. Now, when I'm invited in to work with an intact team, I generally like to have them do an anonymous survey that they know just comes back to my email. Set it up so there's no names. It can be a jot form these days. You don't even ask people what their email is, so they can send it from somebody else's email, make an email up. And questions such as, what's your vision for a high-performing team? What's the purpose of our group? What do we do well? When are we at our best? What's working in our meetings? What's working outside of our meetings? Sometimes I put the goals in. What are the goals of this group? And can you give 2 or 3 examples of pretty effective working together towards the goals? It just depends how detailed and goals you want to be. What else could be more effective? And suggestions for having us be more effective. That's the gentler way of doing it. You can get a little more direct. What's not working? What are unproductive dynamics? What are the impact of those? What's the impact on you? What have you done that you realize had a negative impact or is not producing high performance for our team? So you can ask that second layer of questions. When I do interviews, because if 17 people is too many, but there's 8 or 10 historically have done 30-minute interviews, but it's often an hour by the time I end up talking to folk, because I'm helping them unfreeze. It's that Kurt Lewin organizational change model. People are frozen and stuck in dynamics, unproductive dynamics, toxic workplace dynamics. And so you need to unfreeze. And so that's why all those indirect team building might help people unfreeze and build relationships. The more direct, people can then share, this is what's not working, this is what happened, can you give me examples? So any of that in a confidential space where you're clear, you're not going to use what they've said, but you let them know we're going to bring themes back. Now, let me be clear, this is very advanced and masterful facilitation. So it's one of those, I wouldn't do those at home unless you are a very advanced, experienced facilitator, especially in mediation, conflict, in addition to facilitation skills. If it's a large organization, sometimes people might do focus groups, but I have not done that level of then engagement. These are teams that could be 8 to 10. I just did a group that was closer to 20. And so I need that information so that I can plan the day, know where the potholes are, where maybe the landmines, there it is, are going to be. Now I also talk to the people who are involved. It could be the supervisor, HR might have been involved, your equity inclusion folks might have already been involved. So having confidential information from them that helps you think about how to move forward could be useful. The real-time, authentic conversations about cliques and the unintended impact of cliques, why people might form groups. I would back off of using the term. I might use it a couple times, say that's what the theme said or what people shared, and then just talk about why might people form groups that are maybe unintentionally but are exclusionary, and have them talk about that, times in their lives. And then a time in their life when they were part of a group, high school, junior high, where they were not part of the cool clique. And in fact, maybe they had a group, but it was maybe in reaction to the cool group. So even if they don't talk about diversity, I would still add cool, not cool, in group, out group might be the term you use. And then say, what's the benefit of having these groups? Well, belonging, connection, somebody to go talk to, maybe mentoring, coaching. And so what's the downside? Have them talk about that. And then how might we minimize the downside but find other ways to have a more open space for people to get what they need that they're getting? And then you'll start to get a pushback, something like, but these are my friends, so how can we still hang out with friends and not be exclusionary? So those might be some of the ways it could be useful to talk about cliques. Well, let me underline exclamation point that direct engagement of current dynamics, because after I would do the interviews, I would have a summary, 2-page summary. I'd bring in highlighters. I've had people highlight what felt familiar, what stood out, questions they have. I might have them talk with someone else, but often then I'm like, all right, let's come together. And I would do some warm up first, but that's beyond the facilitation we're doing in the course. This is very advanced conflict mediation, negotiating new ways of being. Interpersonal dynamics are going to come up, and so really working people who are in deep triggered energy, often with lots of history to it. And so it's very advanced work. Now, for folks that are in the course that are thinking how you want to keep working with me, I will be offering, I'm thinking, a 3-month package where we'll talk about difficult situations in workshops. And if people wanted to, we could talk more about this depth of how do you do real-time group development conflict mediation. But if this is something you're interested in, I would encourage you to look around your local environment, your community, your state, who's doing some training on that. I have one resource, Dr. Leah Wing, W-I-N-G, from UMass Amherst, still living, I believe, in that area. She and her partner Deepika do 5-day intensive social justice mediation. There's probably advertising out already about it. May and June, I think, is when they do it. And so there might be other places to learn that for sure. That's just someone I got my doctoral coursework with and respect her work. So, because she has a real social justice lens as we're doing it, which I think you need. You may not talk about diversity and equity as much, but I can't imagine having conversations about cliques without talking about race and sex assigned at birth and years of experience and introvert, extrovert, and hierarchical dynamics within the group. Even if one is a team leader, yes, you have that, but there's going to be other hierarchical dynamics, who gets tapped for stretch assignments, so those sorts of things. So that's my thinking about doing cliques.